السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. قال الله عز وجل في كتاب العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق ولا يكونوا كالذين طال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون. وعن زيد بن أرقم رضي الله تعالى عنه قال جاء رجل إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فسأله بما أتقي النار فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بدموع عينيك أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. My dear respected brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, and especially the students from Michigan Islamic Institute. Miftaah gets all the clout. I recognize you guys. Once there was these two great individuals from the generation of Tabi'in, Ata bin Abi Rabah, rahmatullahi alayh, and Ubayd bin Umair, rahmatullahi alayh. They were very fortunate. They got to live in a time where they saw Sahaba. So they were taking advantage of that opportunity, knocking on doors of Sahaba, asking them things about the Prophet ﷺ, as all of you are doing today over here. The speakers are coming and you're benefiting. This is something that's been passed on tradition from the first day. So today their fate falls upon the door of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. They knock on her door, they ask her, can we enter? And she says, it's been a long time since you last came. It's been a long time since you last came. So one of them say, like how the A'ajim say, zir ghibban tazdad hubban. They try to throw a sly line in there. They said, visit each other once in a while, that increases love. So Aisha says, da'uni aratilul a'jaim. Don't leave these things alone. Don't say these statements that don't make any sense. Right? So from this we understand one more thing for all the youngsters who are sitting here. Sometimes we throw in like a remark. We don't have to do that. Where were you? You know where I was listening to a speech. I went to visit my teacher in Toronto, and he asked me, what are you doing nowadays? I took maybe 60 seconds to tell him what I was doing. I said, we have Miftaah Institute, we have Munir, MI. We're just not more than 60 seconds. He stayed quiet, and after listening, he said, when elders ask you what you're doing, you don't have to flex. We're doing Sheikh Umar Yaqeen and this and that. You don't have to flex. When elders ask you, your parents ask you, you give them a report of what you're doing, but in a way you ask them for du'as. That I'm doing this, but this is a problem I'm having. Or ask them for guidance, but you don't have to flex. And I believe he got this from here, this extra statement. She said, you don't have to say that. Then they said, oh Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, أخبرنا بأعجب شيء رأيته من رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. Tell us the most amazing thing that you've seen the Prophet doing. Wouldn't we want to know? According to her, in this moment, of course, everything the Prophet did was amazing. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. All the different qualities you heard today, they're all amazing. But in this occasion, they asked her, tell us the most amazing thing you saw from the Prophet ﷺ. فَسَكَتَتْ. She stayed quiet. And then she said, one night, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting next to me. And he said, Ya Aisha, ذَرِينِي أَتَعَبَّدْ لِرَبِّي. Oh Aisha, can you excuse me? I would like to worship my Lord. Aisha said, she said, Ya Rasulullah, inni uhibbu qurbak wa uhibbu ma yasurruk. She said, oh Prophet of Allah, I want you to stay next to me. I love for you to stay next to me. But I also love that which makes you happy. This is adab as well. We love something, but giving up what we love for what the other person loves. This is a sign of love. We don't just keep doing what we love. We're giving up the things that you love for what the other person loves. She said, no problem. So she said the Prophet got up, did wudu, and started praying salah. He started crying حَتَّى بَلَّ لِحْيَتَهُ, until his whole beard became wet with tears, as if someone threw a bucket of water over his head. فَمَا زَالَ يَبْكِي حَتَّى بَلَّتِ الْأَرْض. She said that he kept crying until the soil that was in front of him, the earth, that became wet. His lap became wet with tears. His beard he just cried so much. Now, why is this instance so amazing? The Prophet would cry every night. What made this night different? The Prophet ﷺ was not someone who just cried one night. Crying at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, tears at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was the norm of the day. Everyone had soft hearts. Someone asked Shaqiq al-Balkhi rahmatullahi alayhi, what do you want? أشتهي أن أبكي حتى لا أقدر أن أبكي. He says, I wish I could cry so much until a time comes I can no longer cry. Someone asked, ما جنة الدنيا? What is the paradise of dunya? البكاء من خشية الله. Crying out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Zayd ibn Arqam says, a person came to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, how can I be saved from the fire of Jahannam? He says, by crying, shedding tears. Because every single time you shed a tear, this makes Jahannam forbidden for you. No water, no body of water on the face of the earth can extinguish the fire of Jahannam, but the teardrop of a believer can extinguish the fire of Jahannam. So the Prophet would cry every night, but why was this crying different? He said, جُمُودُ الْعَيْنِ مِنْ قَسْوَةِ الْقَلْبِ. The eyes drying out is a sign that the heart has become hard. وَقَسْوَةُ الْقَلْبِ مِنْ كَثْرَةِ الذُّنُوبِ. The heart becoming hard is because the sins that are being committed over and over again. Constantly committing sins. وَكَثْرَةُ الذُّنُوبِ. Why does a person start committing sins? مِنْ نِسْيَانِ الْمَوْتِ. They forget about death. وَنِسْيَانُ الْمَوْتِ مِنْ طُولِ الْأَمَلِ. And a person forgets about death because they think they have a long life to live. So many things left. وَطُولُ الْأَمَلِ مِنْ شِدَّةِ الْحِرْصِ. And this longing that we think we're going to be here for a long time, it comes because a person becomes greedy and desirous of more. وَشِدَّةُ الْحِرْصِ مِنْ حُبِّ الدُّنْيَا. And having this desire for more is a sign of love of dunya. وَحُبُّ الدُّنْيَا رَأْسُ كُلَّ خَطِيئَةٍ. And the core of all sins and vices is the love of dunya. So this is something that was not found in the time of Sahaba. They would cry all the time, but what was different about this occasion? She says the Prophet cried and cried and cried so much. And then Bilal radiallahu anhu came to wake him up for salah, and he was already crying. He didn't see that he was crying. He said, it's time for salah. And then he saw him crying and said, Ya Rasulullah, why are you crying so much? Allah has already forgiven all of your sins. He says, Bilal, أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شُكُورًا. Should I not be a slave that's grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That same night, in the morning, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, they're both narrators of this hadith. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, he says, Ya Rasulullah, last night I heard you reciting a verse the entire night. You kept reciting it in your qiyam, in your ruku, in the sajda. You kept reciting it. And the verse was, إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. This verse you kept reciting and you kept crying, where Isa alayhi salam saying to Allah, if you punish them, then they're your servants. But if you forgive them, then you're almighty and you're all wise. He said, why were you crying so much? He said, O Abu Dhar, I was crying because of my ummah. I raised my hand, I said, Allahumma ummati ummati. Oh Allah, my ummah, my ummah. And Allah sent Jibreel Islam to the Prophet ﷺ, and he asked him, Ma yubkika ya Rasulullah? What makes you cry, O Prophet of Allah? He said, Ummati ummati. My ummah. Thinking nothing else makes me cry, the concern of my ummah. If we look in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, دائم المتواصل الأحزان دائم الفكرة ليست له راحة. He was always concerned. He was always worried. But his worry was nothing of this dunya. His worry was nothing of this family. My brother Sheikh Abdullah, may Allah bless him. After my brother Sheikh Abdul Rahman passed away, I couldn't smile. I was just crying, sitting in a corner. And he came to me and he said to me, he said, listen, you're being very selfish. And I said, you can call me anything, but don't call me selfish. I don't like being called selfish. And I said, Bajan, why are you calling me selfish? He said, the Prophet ﷺ, he went through much more difficulty than you did and than I did, but throughout the day he would smile and he would reserve his crying for the night. So smile throughout the day. Sufyan bin Uyayna, he says, find a friend that will make you smile in the day and will help you cry at night. Find a friend that will make you smile, keep you happy during the day, and assist you in crying at night. Daytime is reserved to be happy, smile. He says, my ummah. And then Jibreel Islam said, Allah is saying, Inna sanurdika fi ummatika, wa la nasu'uka abada. We will make you content and pleased with your ummah. Don't worry about it. The Prophet ﷺ says, Wallahi, I will never be pleased as long as even one ummati of mine is still in the fire of Jahannam. وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْطِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. I will never be pleased as long as there's even one person from my ummah in the fire of Jahannam. So the Prophet had many different occasions where he cried. If we look at the life of the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, you had tears out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You had tears when he heard the Quran. You had tears in salah. But the tears that were with him from the moment he became a Nabi till the day he left this world was the tears of the concern for the ummah. What's going to happen to my ummah? How can I help them be saved from the fire of Jahannam? That remained with him throughout his life, and it will continue on the day of judgment. The tears of reciting the Quran and hearing the Quran will not continue on the day of judgment. But the tears, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to you all? This remained with the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, Fath Makkah, he's standing next to the Kaaba. He says, Aina Bilal? Where is Bilal? Now look, a person, if we analyze the heart of the Prophet ﷺ, he's seeing faces, those faces that caused him so much difficulty. So on one hand, his heart is, this person caused me this, and this person caused me that. When Hind came and she already accepted Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ was telling them to do bay'ah, pledge upon this and that. And then she complained to the Prophet. She said, Ya Rasulullah, my husband Abu Sufyan, he's bakhil. The Prophet ﷺ was in the middle of going over the different fundamentals of deen. And he went back and he says, are you Hind? And she said, yes. The one who commanded to kill my uncle? And she understood from that, because he didn't recognize her before that, because she was covered. And she said, Ya Rasulullah, you already forgave us. You already forgave us. And you know what? He just took a moment, and then he kept on going. He kept going. So imagine seeing these people for the first time. Some of them he didn't even recognize. So I take you to the scene of the Kaaba. It's a beautiful scene that took place. Shaykh Umar has a beautiful talk about Bilal anhu. Just one instance from his life. He says, Aina Bilal, udnu minni ya Bilal. Come close to me, O Bilal. So Bilal anhu comes close to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, Wallahi, walladhi nafsi biyadihi, ma ziltu atadhakkaru yawm kanat Quraysh tu'adhibu Bilalan 'inda al-Ka'bah. He says, Wallahi, throughout my life, I can never forget the days where Quraysh used to punish and persecute Bilal around the Kaaba. Today he's honoring Bilal next to the Kaaba. He's come inside with me and they pray salah. Abu Sufyan outside, he's standing there, and this is a narration. Abu Sufyan says to Abbas, he says, I'm thinking about gathering troops and fighting against the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ comes out of the Kaaba. He says, Inni asma'u ma taqul ya Abu Sufyan. I heard what you said, and you're not going to do that. So at this moment, Abu Sufyan, his yaqeen became even more firm. He said, you know what? He's a prophet of Allah. I gotta put my arms down. Done. He gave up. So now, the Prophet ﷺ then tells Bilal to go on top of the Kaaba to give adhan. So as he's going on top of the Kaaba, Hisham bin Harith, he says, Wallahi laqad tamannaytu an ahshu wajhi fi turab قبل أن أرى هذا اليوم وهذا الغراب يلعق على ظهر الكعبة. He said, Wallahi, I wish I could have died before this day. I was dug deep into the soil that I see this man. He called him a ghurab. This person, being elevated on top of the Kaaba. Abu Sufyan, when the Prophet heard this, he looked at Bilal. He says, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ إِنَّ هَذِهِ الْكَعْبَةِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ لَعَظِيمٌ. Wallahi, this Kaaba is very honorable in the eyes of Allah. وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ يَا بِلَالِ وَإِنَّكَ الْيَوْمِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَعْظَمْ مِنْهَا وَأَشْرَفْ. Oh Bilal, today, Wallahi, you're more honor and you have more fadl than even the Kaaba. Abu Sufyan, then this is where I want to take our attention towards this. Abu Sufyan says to Abbas, he says, Abbas, I want to enter into Islam. He says, go to the Prophet. He says, how can I go to the Prophet with my face? I have done so much. He says, in aqbaltahu bisadqin, if you go to him with truthfulness and sincerity, yaqbaluk, he will accept you. He says, Abu Sufyan is trying to dot all his I's and cross all his T's. So he says, Abbas, how about if he doesn't accept me? Abbas, the one who says, فَقُلْ لَهُ مَا قَالَ إِخْوَةُ يُوسُفْ لِيُوسُفْ. Then tell him what the brothers of Yusuf said to Yusuf. He gave him a strategy. So now Abu Sufyan goes to the Prophet ﷺ. Now imagine the Prophet is Rahim, Ra'uf, Haris. But he couldn't see this person. I have not traveled on between Common and 12 Mile on Hoover since my brother passed away there. I have not been on that road again. I always take a detour. I know I won't be able to do it. I won't be able to do it. And this person, he comes, the Prophet ignores him. Then he comes from the left, the Prophet ignores him. And then Abu Sufyan comes right in front of him. And he says, Ya Muhammad, Tallahi laqad atharaka Allahu alayna wa in kunna la khati'in. And the Prophet, right when he said Abu Sufyan, he puts his head down. He says, Tallahi laqad atharaka Allahu alayna wa in kunna la khati'in. Tallahi laqad atharaka Allahu alayna wa in kunna la khati'in. He keeps saying it, oh Muhammad, Allah has given you superiority. Allah has given you preference over us. We were wrong. And the Prophet keeps looking down. فَرَفَعَ رَأْسَهُ وَهُوَ يَبْكِي وَقَالَ يَا أَبَا سُفْيَانَ لَا تَثْرِيبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْيَوْمِ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَهُوَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. يا أبا سفيان لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. Oh Abu Sufyan, today there's no revenge. May Allah forgive you and He's the most merciful. This same emotions will be with the Prophet on the Day of Judgment. When he will go in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before he goes in front of Allah, the doors of Jannah will not be open till he reaches there. There'll be a whole crowd, like there was a crowd for food right now, much bigger crowd than that. He'll get there. Once he gets there, when someone asks, Ya Rasulullah, where are you going to be in the Day of Judgment? We have this room right here, green room. The scholars are going to be here. Is there going to be a specific place for the Prophet in the Day of Judgment? What the Prophet was doing here, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will be doing that on the Day of Judgment. He says, you won't find me in one place. First, try to find me on the sirat, on the bridge. I'll be there saying, Ya Rabbi Sallim, Ya Rabbi Sallim, Ya Rabbi Sallim. Please, oh Allah, let him go. وَأَنَا آخِذٌ بِحُجَزِكُمْ عَنِ النَّارِ. I'll be grabbing you by your waist, helping you. If you don't find me there, then find me عند الميزان. No single spot sitting down. This idea of sitting in one place, everyone's going to come to you, that's not the Prophet's sunnah. Going to people, helping them where they are. He said, then I'll be at the mizan, at the scale, helping my ummah, so that I'll be saying, Ya Rabbi Sallim, Ya Rabbi Sallim, making dua that their good deeds outweigh their bad deeds. If you don't find me there, you can find me when the book of deeds will be being passed out. I'll be saying, Ya Rabbi Sallim, oh Allah, my ummah, please help them. After Hisab is done, the Prophet will go to the doors of Jannah, and he will notice that there are people from his ummah that are not there. So he'll go back to Allah and he will do sajda. Allah will then tell him, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm not going to say the Arabic. Allah will tell him, irfa' ra'asak, raise your head, sal tu'ta, ask and you should be given, intercede and your intercession will be accepted. And he will say, Ya Rabbi ummati ummati. Oh Allah, my ummah, fayahuddu li had. Allah will then give me an allocation, take these many people out. I will go and tell the angels, this is my ummah, take them out of Jahannam. These people will be taken out. Allah will say to me, Aradita ya Muhammad, are you happy? The Prophet will say, well, oh Allah, I will not be pleased until there's even one ummati of mine in the fire of Jahannam. And he will do sajda again, intercede on our behalf again. Allah will then say to him, okay, take out anyone who's in the fire of Jahannam that has even a speck, a small amount of iman, mithqal dharratin min iman. He will go, take them out, come back. In this hadith, the Prophet said, فَأَسْتَحْيِي, I will be embarrassed. But he's not doing it for himself. My father says something so beautiful. When a person separates from his loved one for a long time, when they finally come back to the same place, first person you remember is that loved one. So we're separated for 2 years, 3 years, and we come back to my father's been away from us. He comes back, he's going to say, where's Abdullah? Where's Abdul Rahman? The Prophet is separated from his family for so long. And when he finally comes to the day of judgment, he's not going to ask about his family, he's going to ask about us. Aina ummati? Where's my ummah? Allah will then say, take out anyone that has even an iota of iman. Then he'll come back and Allah will say to him, aren't you happy? He says, no. Abdullah bin Abbas, he says, as-sabiq bil khayrat, the ones who were good and always doing good deeds and always in the forefront, they will go to Jannah bighayri hisab. The muqtasid, the moderate people, the ones who sinned and then did good deeds, and sinned and did good deeds, Allah will give them an easy hisab. Allah will give them easy hisab. And the ones who were zalim, li nafsi, the ones who did bad deeds throughout their life, the Prophet ﷺ will say to us, I will be there helping you on the day of judgment. I will be there, taking you, begging Allah, crying in front of Allah, oh Allah, this is my ummah. Finally, the Prophet will come back and say, Ya Rab, please, there's still some people in Jahannam that belong part of my ummah. Allah will then say to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, anyone who said, La ilaha illallah, take them out of Jahannam and take them to Jannah. Ki Muhammad se wafa tune, to hum tere hain. Ye jahan cheez hai kya lawh wa qalam tere hain. The Prophet was wafa. He had wafa for us. He was loyal to us. My father, he said something very interesting. He said, just like how it's written, how many steps you're going to take in your life, how much food you're going to eat in your life, how much you're going to sleep, it's also written how much you're going to cry, how many tears are going to come out. Now it's up to us where those tears are shed. If we don't cry for the same reason the Prophet cried, then Allah will make us cry for dunya. It has to come out. If we don't cry for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the Prophet, out of love for the Prophet, then those tears will come out because something bad will happen in our family, because we will lose some money, lose something. So let us be those people. You know, my father said, tell everyone that the purpose of the Prophet ﷺ and the purpose of this conference in Urdu is apni hai badalna. Apni hai. Change change your you know that that comes out of your heart. We need to change that. We need to change that. Umar ibn Khattab anhu was standing, and a person comes to him, and this is a statement in Arabic, and I'll conclude with this. And someone said to him, Umar, I need you to help me out. And Umar ibn Khattab was doing something, and he was busy. And he said, Umar, I need you to help me out. And Umar pushed him away. And after a few moments, he realized that I did wrong. So he said, call him back. So he came back, and Umar ibn Khattab said, forgive me. He says, no, I'm not going to forgive you. I'm gonna hold you accountable on the day of judgment. So Umar ibn Khattab then grabbed his clothes. He says, please forgive me. And he started crying, please, please forgive me, please. And the person had mercy on him and said, okay, I forgive you. And then Umar ibn Khattab says, Wahin ya Umar, kunta adalla an-nas fa'azaka Allah, wa kunta adalla an-nas fahadaka Allah, wa kunta awda'a an-nas farafa'aka Allah. He said, wah, this wah. think you are? You had nothing. You were nobody. Allah gave you respect. What will you say to Allah on the day of judgment if He asks you about this person? This is changing a cry of our heart. The purpose of this conference today is that the cry of our heart changes. What we are concerned about changes. This was the concern of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah make us among those who shed tears, the same tears that the Prophet shed for his ummah, out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet was loyal to us, we should be loyal to him. The Prophet ﷺ loved us, we should love him. The Prophet cried because he wanted to meet us, we should cry because we want to meet him. Inshallah, if we are like this, Allah will resurrect us with the Prophet on the day of judgment. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.